Welcome back to the ACL Academy, and this is Dr. Khan. Today, I'm going to touch on 4 common mistakes that I see for ACL recovery. Before I get into that, please subscribe to the page, like the video, share it with a friend, spread the word. It's super important as you go through this process that you gather as much information and educate yourself as much as you can before getting into it. It is a long process, it's a tough process. There are some ups and downs, twists and turns. So it's important to get started on the right foot. So this way you can have the smoothest recovery as possible. So as I said, I'm going to touch on the 4 biggest mistakes that I see. Number 1 is people rushing into surgery. The common misconception to think that the faster that I get my ACL reconstructed, the faster I will recover. That is wrong. We need to take some time after our injury to rehab our knee. We call this prehab, to prepare the knee for surgery. So a few prerequisites that we're going to do before surgery. Number 1 is we start physical therapy, we start rehab, we start our recovery as soon as possible after injury, okay? And there are a few things that we need to work on. First is swelling control, right? When we first get an injury, the body's going to send a lot of fluid to the knee to help repair and get into that first phase of healing. So our knee is going to be blown up. So we want to take care of that swelling, take some time off our feet, get the leg elevated, get it compressed. So this way we can get some of that fluid out. Next big thing is we want to get our range of motion back. After an injury like this, the knee is going to go into protection mode. The body's going to stiffen up or not going to allow some movement. So we're going to get some scar tissue development. It's important that we get our range of motion back. So 2 phases of range of motion. One is the straightening, otherwise known as extension. So getting it nice and straight. And then secondly is the flexion or the bending. What we want to look to do is slowly work on that motion and build it back up. We want to get it symmetrical to the other side. So we want full extension, and even if our knee goes into hyperextension, we want to get that knee to match the other leg. And then same with bending. If we can get heel to butt on the other leg, that's what we want to look to do. So we start our prehab, we get our swelling under control, we get our motion back, and then third, we also want to get as strong as we can. So we won't, after an injury like this to the knee, that quad muscle goes on vacation, it shuts down. So you're going to get some atrophy or muscle wasting, weakening. We want to wake those quads back up and get them as strong as possible. So the goal, right, is not to rush into surgery and to establish some prerequisites. That's getting swelling under control, getting full motion back, and getting that quad strength to be about 80% of the other side before going for surgery. And why do we do this? Well, there's some good data, some good evidence to suggest that the better the knee that goes in, especially with those prerequisites that I just listed, the better outcomes, the smoother outcomes. So that's number 1 common mistake that I see: people rush into surgery. Take 2 to 3 months after your injury, do some good rehab, get those prerequisites down, and then go on for surgery. Number 2, common mistake that I see for ACL recovery is following just a specific protocol, a specific piece of paper that's given to you by the doctor. Now, these protocols, these are guidelines. These aren't things that we follow to the T. The reason being, a lot of these protocols are time-based. So they'll say week 1, do these types of exercises. Week 2, do these types of exercises. Week 12, start running. It doesn't work like that. Okay, so yes, there is some healing time frames that we do need to follow, but in order to advance in our recovery, we physically have to look a certain way. So to give you some examples, right? A lot of protocols will say establish jogging at week 10 to 12. Now, most ACLers will not be ready during this time period. So I use more of a physical guideline, meaning we want, let's say, taking running for example, in order to start jogging, we physically want you to have no swelling, no pain. We want you to have full range of motion, and we test your strength, and we want your strength levels to be 80% of the other side. So we test your quad, hamstring, and glute strength on your injured side or recovering side and compare it to your healthy leg. And we want it to be at least 80% of the other side before we start to run. Now, some people may be ready at 12 weeks. Some people may be ready at 16 weeks. Some people may be ready at 20 weeks. So we can't follow just a piece of paper or protocol from the doctor, as these are just based on time alone. And this recovery process is not based on time. It's based on physical ability and objective testing. So that's the second biggest mistake that I see. Third biggest mistake that I see is people rushing through this process without laying the foundation. What does that mean? Right after surgery, it's important that we build that base layer, okay? So just like after an injury, after your surgery, you kind of start from ground zero again, right? You're going to have swelling because of the surgery itself. You're going to have pain. You're going to be restricted in motion again. And unfortunately, your quad muscle is going to go on vacation again. So it's important that we do a few things before we really start to get going with this process. Number one, and very important, take care of that swelling. Take time off your feet after surgery. Don't be trying to walk long distances. Let the body recover from that operation and let it start to absorb some of that fluid. Secondly, the most important goal after surgery is to get your full extension back, your full straightening back. So we're going to work on that as top priority. And then we also, in addition, will start getting your knee bending and moving again. So little by little, within that first month or two, we want to achieve full motion. Okay, that's your foundation right there. Then once you've built that foundation, then we start to move into those next levels. It's too often that I hear about people trying to walk long distances or trying to really get into some weight-bearing strengthening right away. We want to take care of that swelling. Don't stress the knee joint more than we have to. We want to take care of that motion, achieve full motion again, and then wake up those quad muscles. So this way, when we get into that strength phase, we've already built that foundation there. So super important with that. And lastly, the biggest thing, one of the biggest mistakes that I see is people not working with an ACL specialist, right? We choose our providers not based on location and where they are, or somebody that the surgeon has worked with. It's important that you choose your ACL recovery specialist to help guide you through this process. As I said before, it's a long rehab journey. There could be some bumps in the road, some ups and downs. It's important that you're working with an ACL specialist to guide you, especially if we're trying to return to a high-level sport that requires cutting, pivoting, jumping. A lot of times, when conversations that I have with ACLers, they're not familiar with, finding somebody that is specialized in this specific niche. And I also did a video on this, so please check that out as well, finding the ACL specialist to help guide your process. Most people will choose their physical therapist, their physio, based on number one, the location they live in, number two, somebody in their insurance plan. And I understand we want to use our free health coverage. Having said that, because there's a lot on the line with this process, and we're trying to get back to sports activities that we love, we want to do it safely. And the reason being, the statistics are not great for, number one, returning to that level of sport that we once were. Okay, this is anywhere from 50 to 60% people actually returning to their level of sport. And secondly, our re-injury rates are reported anywhere from 20 to 30%, especially if we're going back to a high level, high volume sport and activity that requires, again, a lot of cutting, pivoting, jumping. So that's why it's so important that you do so much homework in investing in the right surgeon to do your ACL care. It's so important to invest in an ACL specialist to help guide your process, as this will ensure that we get there safely, we get there confidently, and we also minimize that risk for re-injury. So just to recap, guys, things that I talked about, 4 common mistakes. Number one, rushing into surgery. Okay, important. Take some time, do some prehab, get that knee ready for surgery. Number two, following a piece of paper or a protocol alone, and just going off of time after surgery to progress through your recovery process. We progress based on physical ability and objective tests and measures. Number three, not laying that foundation and trying to rush through the process. So just as after you got injured, after surgery, you're working on a few different things as foundation. That's swelling control, getting motion back, waking up that quad muscle before we really get going with the strengthening part of this recovery process. And number four, biggest mistake that I see, not working with an ACL specialist to guide your recovery. So important that you find a specialist that actually treats and works with ACLs frequently, that can guide you safely and confidently, return you back to sport, and minimize your risk for re-injury. If you have any questions, leave them below. If you like this video, please mark off that you liked it. Please subscribe to the channel and share with a friend.